Well, it's been a crazy week, so this is your Saturday and not your Friday Geospatial 2.0 talk. And I'm wearing my blue. I've just been for a run, so this is my casual look as against my smart business look. So today we're going to talk a cautionary tale. Let's start with preparing for today and tomorrow. So I do a lot of work around building the foundation within the world of GIS and Geospatial. And to me, I think of analogies of actually building houses. Without a foundation, your house is going to fall down. And I've said that in previous talks. And I think in many ways, data is that foundation. Have we got the data? Is it ready to be used? Is it accessible? Is it good data? All those things that surround data. And we're not just talking about two-dimensional data anymore. We're talking about three-dimensional and four-dimensional data as well. So having that solid foundation is at the core of a lot of what I do and think about and work with customers in my sort of working life. The next piece of that, sort of preparing for today and tomorrow, is what materials you're going to use. And that depends on what you have available and your end goal. And I put that word modernization up there, and that can be interpreted in many different ways. And on the one side, I've got actually I took that from the Three Pigs, the houses that could be blown down and the brick house that couldn't be blown down. So in many ways, I think the end goal of what one is trying to do with GIS and Geospatial determines the level of modernization one needs. But I think that it's really important to actually look at once you've got that foundation, you've got that data built, what you have in place. Do you have an updated GIS, and do you need one? Do you need other systems in place to complement the GIS that you've got? Maybe other geospatial systems that are not GIS. So, modernization is a wide term, but it's a very important term, and it's part of that. One could put it into the foundational aspect of things, but really what one needs to have in place is dependent on what one wants to do. And then the third piece of that is really where the Geospatial 2.0 piece comes in. And again, if I use the house analogy, we can do things in houses that we could never do before. I mean, we could put solar panels on the house now, and we can heat the house through solar. There's a million and one things in today. Not only how we construct houses, but what we put inside of houses, etc. So, we've moved from living in caves to these modern things that we've built. And in some ways, the Geospatial 2.0 notion is really that next phase of the geospatial world. In many ways, I've said it before, the Geospatial 2.0 term is going to go away. I'm going to get rid of that because we need something that's much more sort of generic. It's really about the next phase of geospatial. So, in the house building terms, that's new. That's new materials and new approaches. So those are the preparing for today and tomorrow. The world that we live in today, today's geospatial reality is really, again, from a previous talks I've done, we've really sort of split it down into the world that we've inherited, the 1.0 world, and this 2.0 notion where we've got machine learning, AI, 3D, 4D, all of the new stuff that's happening in the geospatial world. And there's really a wall between them both. So let's just explore that a little bit more deeply. I've put that title down, Don't Believe the Hype. Geospatial has become like the Wild West. And the GeoInt conference last week or week before, I didn't go, but I heard folks who went there told me about it. It feels very much like the Wild West at the minute. So there's money pouring in. There's almost a startup frenzy, and I've spoken a lot about sort of the startup world. We're not just talking about the space economy. We're talking about everything attached to geospatial data. Not only the creation of that data, the processing of data with AI and machine learning and other algorithms, but there's almost this frenzy. There's money pouring in from the venture world into this environment, this geospatial environment. And we're unfortunately, and again, I'm sort of looking from that previous slide, I'm looking really at the 2.0 side of the world, not the 1.0. We've really got elements of arrogance, ignorance, and inexperience in that sort of new, evolving, money-rich world. When I hear about, and again, I'll be careful here, I'm a great believer in the fact that we need, what I heard somebody say, ponytails in the boardroom. We need young folks in the boardrooms that are telling experience, older hands about different perspectives, new ideas. But when I hear that at GeoInt there's like 20-year-olds and young 30-year-olds on sort of the main stage, and I hope they're not being thought of as thought leaders, but really, you know, my worry is that inexperience is sort of driving some of these conversations. Nothing against those guys, because I think they're great, but their perspectives are important. But thought leaderships comes from experience. I sort of feel strongly about that. So we feel like we're sort of in the internet boom and bust period. I remember well at the 90s, I worked at a couple of startups which went bust. And frankly, it was a crazy time. Loads of people made lots of money, but there were so many ideas that went to the wall. And the thing that bothered me the most about the internet boom and bust, some good things came out of it, but so much wasted talent. You know, so many clever people on working on projects in companies where it was pretty obvious it was going to fail. My fear is there's going to be a lot of that in the geospatial world. As I see all these startups and money pouring in, it feels like we're in that phase of internet boom and bust, and I worry that there's going to be a hell of a lot of wasted talent. So we've got old and new. The old, which is, again, I don't like the term, but the 1.0 world, the traditional GIS world and beyond, remote sensing, etc. We really have tried and tested platforms, technologies, point solutions out there. So, you know, solid foundation. We've got organizations which are in that world who are solid foundational organizations, you know, sort of trade groups and those that sort of look at standards, etc. But when I think about particularly the companies in that space, there's a selfish gene there. Obviously, they're all out to make a profit. And also, they're filled with antibodies. What do I mean by antibodies? Those are resistant to change. So there's a couple of challenges within the old world of looking backwards, tried and tested is how we've always done it, and that selfish sort of, what's in it for us? So what about the new world? Well, I would argue that's really where the heart of innovation is happening. There's a lot of innovation in that world, but it's unproven, it's short term, and in many cases it's led by those that are very inexperienced. So we've got two challenges. So the question that really sits in my mind, and again, this is something which is part of my daytime work within Critigen, is to think, how do we best mix the old with the new? So the best of the old and the best of the new. So we take the solid foundation that is the 1.0 world, and we actually take advantage and bring in the innovation that's happening in the 2.0 world, the real innovation, the stuff that's there for the long term, not for the short term. So I'll go back to that diagram I just used earlier. Certainly we've got the two worlds, certainly they're separated. So the real question that is in my mind, the real driver for me, is how do we bridge that gap? And frankly, the folks that I'm most interested in talking to, and the fact I most often talk to and I'm trying to connect with, are people that are in that place where they get both sides of this conversation. They're not just drinking the 1.0 Kool-Aid, and they're not just running off on the 2.0 world with their heads in the sand in many ways. So, you know, how can we bridge that gap between the two? And I talk and work with a lot of folks that have that mentality of recognizing the importance of the old and how the new can actually move this whole industry forward. So there's my Saturday talk for the day. As ever, that's me, that's my email address. I'm always interested in your comments. Please, if when I post this, please make comments below. If you like it, tell me. If you agree, if you disagree, let me know. You can email me this address. So I love your feedback. Love to connect with you if you're in that place where you're too trying to bridge that gap. Happy weekend, and we'll talk next week.